Oh, Chad, stay where you are, Chad. There you go. Yeah, they come. Great. We've just had a flurry of joiners. So for those of you who have just joined us, good morning and a very, very warm welcome. It's an overcast and chilly day here. Well, not so chilly, actually. It's just a tepid day here in Joburg, and we desperately need rain. So I actually just wish it would carry on and rain because we need it. So hope you're all well. I'm sorry I missed you for the last couple of weeks. I had a work commitment, and then, of course, I was in the Kruger Park last week, which was very, very special. Don't ever underestimate the power of the park. I tell you, it's just such a good place to go to, and just almost like a sponge. You just feel it all leaving your body as you drive in. So wonderful. And I'm delighted to have with us today Dorian. And I think, Dorian, many of us will know you, and certainly we've heard and we've known of you over the years as the champion of the ground transport business. But I know you've been involved, and just from our perspective, a very warm welcome. Thank you for being here. And just by way of introduction, I think you're probably better positioned to introduce yourself than I would be. Just tell us a little bit of a personal background, who you are, what you're doing, and where you're from.
Cool. Well, thank you very much for having me. It's an absolute pleasure, and I hope I can bring some insights to everybody. So, yeah, I really appreciate being here today, and I hope everyone learns and we can have some fun. Just a little bit of background. I've been in travel for all my life, bar 2 years when the cell phone industry started, but that wasn't for me. I decided I needed to get back into travel, and ran a shuttle business for 23 years. Most of you would be quite familiar with professional passenger services, and in 2019 we had enough of that, running cars, and we had quite a large staff complement. We'd been developing a technology a bit before that, and launched it at the end of 2019. So we've been involved with that over the last 2 years. On the personal side, I'm a very keen cyclist, so when I'm not working, I'm out riding my bike. And in fact, tomorrow, 2 weeks off to Cape Town to go and ride the Wines to Wells. So I'm really looking forward to that, and got 2 more weeks of intense training before we go and have a bit of fun up there.
Wow, I admire you. I was at Glencairn a couple of weeks ago doing a trail run, a 2-day trail run. So I say it as if like I'm a trail runner. Believe me, I'm not. We did a trail walk. It was so beautiful, but it really is. It's not easy, not for the faint-hearted. So I have. Yeah.
No, it takes you to beautiful places. That's what I really like about it. The farmers really open up, and you just go and see places that you just normally wouldn't go to. So it's the same as the trail runners. It's really beautiful.
Yeah, exactly it. I mean, we were in the Underberg in the Drakensberg, and I promise you, I just don't remember when last I had that experience of walking through the mountains and just the most exquisite scenery and green and lush, and encountered cows, and the only person who gave me any trouble was a cow, and it was wonderful. She's so refreshing. Dorian, how has the last 18 months been for you? And so obviously the lockdown, how's that done in your life? Or what has it done in your life?
It's a bit of a yin and yang, and I'm not sure if I greeted everybody, but everybody, and for you. It's a bit of yin and yang. The first lockdown, in fact the hard lockdown, I thoroughly enjoyed. I enjoyed the peace and quiet. I enjoyed the vehicles not being on the road, and it was really good just to gather some thoughts. Obviously, we had started the new business, the Tusker technology for ground transport operators, and we had to rethink because we were launching in March of 2020, and obviously that wasn't going to happen. So it was great to have that forced tranquility, if I could put it that way, and gave me a bit of time to rethink and re-strategize the business. And then the rest of the period, we've been building a lot of contacts, doing additional development work, being in contact with a number of the operators, and been pivoting a bit the business because there has been some changes in demands made of us during this period as new findings come to light. So it's been an interesting period. It has been extremely stressful. Obviously, we're a startup, so not generating much revenue at this stage, but it's exciting as well. So
Yeah, good. No, I think it has been. I mean, we're coming out of it, but I think we're still to see the effect of what it has done, just personally, emotionally, business, career-wise, financially. You know, we're all sort of staggering out a bit like zombies and now trying to find our way. So, yeah, you know, your business has always been in the ground transport industry, and coming out of COVID, I'm interested to hear, how do you think that has changed? How do you think it will change, and or maybe it's just going to stay the same?
So there has been some changes and there hasn't been. So, I mean, obviously, it goes without saying that a number of the operators have closed or either reduced the size of their fleets substantially. So I think that's going to be an impact as travel picks up, and we're hearing that leisure travel is going to be picking up exponentially. And is there going to be enough supply? We see in the car rental industry that there really is a problem with supply. And that I think is going to be one of the challenges going forward over the short to medium term. Obviously, finances for the operators. Have they been maintaining their vehicles that they do have? Are they maintained? Have they kept the insurances and their liabilities in place? So those are things that are, you know, that are a concern as we go, as travel starts picking up. But some of the changes would be things like the COVID protocol.
Yeah.
The guys have been really good about that for the most part. Putting those in place and making sure that they adhere to those COVID protocols. Although I see, you know, as we go to level 1, some of the guys have been a bit slack on that and starting to relax. So it is important to know that you've got a good understanding with your suppliers. So yeah, those are some of the changes. I think in terms of the way bookings are being made with the operators and the relationship with the operators, I haven't seen much of a change. The people that I've been talking to, it hasn't been at the forefront of anybody's mind. I think they've been looking more at the bigger picture. So I'm not expecting too much change in that respect going forward.
Okay. And I mean, you talk about the protocols, but obviously from a travel buyer perspective, we've seen the duty of care just take on an exponential meaning in policy and being elevated quite high. When it comes to ground transport, what do you think travel buyers should be thinking about or considering as far as that is concerned?
They should be thinking about ground transport for starters. You know, a number of the corporates we've been talking to, it's the last thing on the agenda. And it's funny, we're the first and last part of a travel itinerary, most probably the riskiest part of any travel itinerary. And I've even had some corporate travel managers coming back to me and saying, if you just don't want to know, because it's another thing that we're going to have to manage. But as I said, it's most probably the riskiest part of the travel journey, and it's really surprising that so little emphasis has been placed on those providers and the importance that they play in the travel journey. So there's a lot to think about from travel providers. You know, there's never going to have a provider that has all the scope and scale that you need. But you definitely want to know that they've got insurances and liabilities in place. Their vehicles have the necessary certificates of fitness, are maintained, are their drivers trained, how do they communicate with them? You know, there's quite a lot of things that should be looked at. You know, when are the vehicles replaced? How are they managed? Do they go home? Do they stay in the depot? You know, what are the working rosters? A lot of the operators don't even have working rosters for their drivers, which is insane. And as we onboard operators onto our platform and we coach and train them, you'd be surprised that they actually don't even understand their business. And I think that's really important for travel buyers to know who they're dealing with. And it's not to say not to work with them, but how can we then uplift and train those guys to become more sustainable businesses and to become more professional operators?
Yeah, it's quite, I mean, it's, as you said, it's the first part and the last part of any trip, and we don't always include it in the trip, but it's actually the most hectic. I mean, I heard somebody the other day leaving really early, had a very early flight before curfew, had boarding pass, had everything, got stopped, missed the flight because it was just an absolute nightmare of trying to negotiate and deal and the whole thing. And you just think, GCM, you know, you don't think of these things. And it was an important flight. He was beside himself. So yeah, I can imagine it is hectic. And just from an African perspective, so Southern Africa, South Africa, we understand, but ground transport are we inclined to actually, if we don't rent cars, do we just take transfers? Do we rely on third-party transfers? And what is the state of that looking like?
So there's a variety of mediums, and there's something called MaaS, or Mobility as a Service, and we can touch on that a bit later. where the range of services, ground transport services, are being incorporated into certain platforms. But it's a mix. We rely a lot on our friends and family. South Africans would like to drive themselves as well, but then parking becomes exceptionally expensive. So there's a playoff there about how long are you leaving your car at the airport versus how much is the transfer cost going to, how does it compare against the transfer cost? Of course, you've got e-hailing as well, and that's another contentious issue. Public transport is very limited in South Africa, so you don't have many options. And I think because we don't have good public transport, that's why a lot of South Africans just resort to driving. So we're very familiar with that. But there are good and amazing shuttle providers out there, and there's more opportunity for that for travelers to take advantage of that service.
Yeah.
But booking them is the issue. That's where the biggest challenge comes in. So sorry, go ahead.
Sorry, I just want to ask a question. I mean, if we're booking passengers into Nairobi or into Lagos or into Kigali, how does, what is best practice? How does one do that? Or what should we be doing?
So, to say what is best practice, I don't even believe there is a template for best practice at this stage. It's a very segmented industry. It's disjointed globally, and we're seeing a lot of that. So, and the problem with Africa and Southern Africa is our operators, with full respect, are not very tech savvy. They get into the car and they just want to do the service. And as opposed to Europe and America, and predominantly the major cities, you'll find even in the smaller cities, the guys all still handle things via either a diary or an Excel spreadsheet. And they wait for an email to come in or a cell phone, to receive a phone call. And it's not efficient. In South Africa, in Southern Africa particularly, travel agents might have a rate sheet in front of them. Is the rate sheet up to date? Do they even read it properly? And the number of providers, so the rate sheet's all different. Which one do you refer to? And they get a rate, they email their provider. A lot of them are owner drivers. Do they get a response in time? Maybe they phone them, they contact the call because they're busy doing a transfer. It's a very tedious and erroneous process, and I'm surprised that it has worked the way it has worked for so many years. And it is ripe for change. Definitely technology's there to enable that. And I think there's an education that needs to be brought in, particularly with the operators, for them to understand that it's not taking business away from them, but it's helping them to grow their businesses and become more efficient.
And is it the same in the US, Europe, other parts of the world?
To a lesser degree. So in the smaller towns and villages where you have these small operators that only service that town or village, a lot of them are still doing manual bookings, which is very surprising. But in the bigger cities, London, New York, Paris, and the likes, there's a lot of technologies, particularly in the Northern Hemisphere, in the US and Europe, and the bookings are made online, and they're made online in under 90 seconds. So that's a really quick and easy process. It's funny, it's a very competitive space, but it's also a very collaborative space because the guys do work very well together. Nobody can have enough fleet to service everything all the time. That's one of the challenges. So, but for the most part, and for our first world travelers, traveling to Europe and America, it's online. It's relatively easy to make a booking with the provider.
Yeah. So you mentioned e-hailing, and what is the impact been of e-hailing on ground transport? And if you would just unpack e-hailing, it's not a brand, and maybe just give us pros, cons. What is it we need to know about this? Is it a disruptor?
It certainly is. I think more from the taxi industry than it is from the pre-booked service. And there's certainly a place for it. The taxi industry needed to be updated and upgraded. And I think it's had a positive impact on the shuttle industry as well. It's given the guys a bit of a kick to be a bit more dynamic, but it doesn't quite service that market efficiently. So e-hailing, for those that don't know, is basically the likes of Uber or DD have just launched in South Africa, if anybody are aware of that, or Bolt, where you can on demand order a taxi to take you from A to B. And it's a great service. So it's created an industry, it's created a lot of jobs. Sustainability is an issue, definitely. We can see that in the way the cars have been maintained and managed. But it has created jobs, and it has a place, definitely. I think it has a place for all those last minute services. It has a place for people who don't really want to have a relationship, are happy just to get into a car and get going. And like all the modes of transport, I mean, it's to say, taxis, taxis have always been around and shuttles have been around for many decades. Buses have been around, trains have been around, they all work complementary, and that's where the Mars platform comes in. So there is a place for it, and it definitely has accelerated ground transport shuttle operators, particularly on the pre-booked space, to become a lot more dynamic. So it's been good from that perspective, but there is a concern that we've raised and we've seen where corporates are using them and comparing e-hailing to pre-booked services, and they're not really comparable services.
Okay, and so what is not comparable about them? I mean, obviously, if you e-hailing, is there insurance that I can, am I covered from an insurance perspective in the event of, God forbid, an accident?
So yes, the companies that operate e-hailing services have got passenger liability or some sort of liability insurance in their own right. The problem is, and I don't know if any of you listening have tried to get hold of one of these e-hailing, and it's an impossibility. It's all through the app. It's sending a message to them, trying to get something back. Have you left something in the car? How do you get in touch with them? It really is very, very difficult. And how effective are they in responding to any queries that you have? It's not a relationship. It's just a service. And I think that's what corporate buyers need to understand. What are they looking for? A relationship comes to the fore in a time of crisis. So yes, we get the discount. They definitely are cheaper. And I must be honest, I don't know why they are cheaper, because the service is really effective in the sense that they come last minute, come in an instant. So I think it could be a more sustainable business model. But that being said, you don't have a relationship. You don't know who your driver is. You don't know what the car's going to look like. You don't know if the car has been upheld. The platforms do not manage those vehicles at all. They do not look at the service intervals. They do not look at the maintenance plans. They do not look how the drivers are being trained, if at all. And that's an issue. Why is that being managed so well with hotels and airlines and everything else that goes into a travel itinerary, but not at all from a ground transport provider? And it is something that needs to be raised.
Wow. Interesting. So obviously, the digitization of the travel industry, and we all talk about it for as much as we do. And I think the industry has been digitized long ago. This is not new to us. It's obviously just the advent of different platforms. But surely from the booking tools that we use, being able to get the PNR or the ground transport as part of the PNR, is that happening? Is that something that can happen, or are we still adding it in as a passive?
So in South Africa, it seems to be very quiet. Nobody seems to know about it, but it is available. One or two operators in South Africa are in the GDSs, and very progressive for that, and definitely leading the market in that respect, and somebody to people to follow. But we need opportunity and we need variety, and it's very difficult to get into the GDSs. They're expensive to integrate with, they're expensive to maintain. And of course, the GDSs don't want to have integrations from every provider in South Africa, for example. So there's got to be a better way of being able to provide all these transport providers onto a GDS platform in a much simpler manner. So that's where we come in. But it's an integral part, and I think it's necessary, as I explained earlier on. The process of making a booking with an operator is very tedious and cumbersome. And now that we are coming into post-COVID, we've cut a lot of costs. Staff have been reduced, but they're expected to do more. And you can't expect them to be emailing and waiting for a confirmation and having a passive segment and et cetera, et cetera. If it's part of the PNR, part of the GDS, it's a seamless process, and you need that effectiveness and efficiency. So it is available in South Africa and Southern Africa, but we need to get more operators into that space.
So almost as in the form of the aggregator. That's
right. So essentially, most of the operators and people who deal with shuttle providers know most of them do not have booking tools. A lot of them don't even have websites. They're still using a Gmail account. And so there's a lot of opportunity for advancement there. And basically what we need to do, and what we've done, is we've created a platform where we can put all the operators onto a single platform, and that platform then integrates with other booking tools. So through a single integration, you've got access to a multitude of operators. And I think that's the advantage for our operators, is that we're giving them exposure to markets that they would not be able to gain in their own right. and wouldn't even understand, so it's not even in their own life, they just don't understand the technological side of it. And I think that's a great value to travel buyers, is they can have access to their preferred providers, and they don't have to use everybody on the platform. And it's available in one central database, so very effective from that perspective. And it helps grow these operators. That's what we want to do. We want to see these operators grow and develop.
Fantastic. Okay. If I was responsible for buying travel or being a travel buyer, also what we know coming out of the last 18 months, I would want to know what the status of whoever it is that I'm going to choose to work with. So even if I've approved them as a supplier pre-COVID, pre-pandemic, coming out of it, what should I be looking for in terms of licensing? And I know I touched on it earlier in duty of care, but there's other stuff. It's there's other requirements. What should I be looking for?
Yeah, so I mean, first and foremost, we're going to check that the licenses, the insurance is up to date. We've got particularly the passenger liability, but the motor liability or the asset liability, asset insurance is also really important. And I think something that is overlooked from travel buyers again is how sustainable is your provider? You don't want to create a relationship with the transport provider and they don't have insurance on the assets, on the vehicles, and then they get involved in an accident and now they can't service you anymore. So while it doesn't have an immediate impact as a passenger liability might have, it is important to do that. And I've noticed that a lot of travel buyers don't even consider that as an option. They just want the passenger liability. But yes, to make sure that those are in place. The other one is a simple one. It's called a certificate of fitness, which a lot of people don't know. And for some reason, the e-hailing vehicles don't need it. It's where your vehicle, if you are a vehicle earning revenue from carrying passengers, needs to go in and be certified that it's roadworthy on an annual basis. And why the e-hailing vehicles don't have to do that, I do not know. They carry paying passengers. But it means that our vehicles, as in the shuttle industry, I'm referring to the shuttle industry, means our vehicles are verified annually that they are roadworthy and fit for passenger transport. So that's a little thing that needs to be have a look at. Have the vehicles been serviced? If they haven't been doing the mileage, they still need to be serviced, irrespective. It's once a year or 15,000 kilometers or whatever the manufacturer's specifications are. So those are one or two of the things that you should look around at. Have any of their documents expired? They may have expired. We have a lot of delays at government services, government departments because of COVID. Transport permits, have they been renewed? Professional driving permits for the drivers, have those been renewed? So there are a number of items that need to be looked at when going back to business. And of course, how many vehicles does your provider have? Because you may still have your provider around. That would be really grateful, if they have managed to see through COVID. But how many vehicles do they have? Can they still meet your expectations and your demands, or do you need to provide or find and source additional providers? So, which is another question in itself, is where do you source additional providers, and how do you now spend time going to vet them, and do you have the time to vet them? So again, that's where we come in. We've got so many providers on our platform, continually adding providers to our platform, and we do the vetting of those providers. So we check to make sure that they've got everything in place. We know what's required as a transport provider, and we do all of that and pass that on as and when required by the corporates that want to make use of those providers. So again, we're a single point of contact even for corporates to be able to access a multitude of operators.
Brilliant. So just to everybody on the call, if anybody has a question, please just put up your hand and you can ask it, and I'll get to you, or if you want to type it in the chat line, by all means. But I think it's an interesting aspect, and I always hate using Dubai as a comparative for us. But I remember getting a transfer in Dubai, and the guy, as he met us. And before we got into his car, he took a wet towel. He wiped the suitcases. He took all the plastic off. He then wiped down the suitcases. We got in the car. Obviously, there was ice cold aircon. We each got a bottle of water, and then he produced one of those multifaceted charging devices, where suddenly we could actually now charge our phone. It was those little things. It was just such a great value add. And I mean, I just think it could go so far in doing that. But more importantly, so those are the value adds. But we know stuff goes wrong. What does go wrong? What kind of stuff goes wrong?
So just to get to your previous point on value adds, and I do want to touch on it, is that again, we're the first and last section of the itinerary, and it's not just about that we're taking you home or bringing you back. It's the experience, and that's what we need to expand on, is the experience that your passenger and traveller is going to have with our providers. But yeah, what goes wrong? You know what goes wrong? And it's crazy. It's a simple little thing. It's a spare wheel. You're riding down the freeway and you have a puncture, and the operator doesn't have a spare wheel. They've already used that spare wheel, and now there's a problem. And that is something that's really important. People overlook it, but it's crazy that a simple thing like that happens, and it's not inflated correctly. So that's where you've got to have a relationship with your provider, or have a number of providers so that you can make contact them, see if they can pass that same route, they assist and pick up that same passenger. So that's a little thing. Obviously, things like where the vehicle can't find the address, who do they call on? How do they, what support have they got in the background? If they don't make it, if they're running late, do they make contact with you? Do they let you know the real arrival time as opposed to the wanting to make you happy arrival time? Yeah. So those are simple things in terms of inconveniences, and then obviously the more serious ones is an accident. What is the protocol involved in an accident or a hijacking? And we've unfortunately had a few of those, and it's important to understand how your provider deals with those situations. Do they are they part of it? Are they your partner in that investigation? Can they provide you with the information that's required to resolve it, promptly and successfully? I mean, a simple example was when we ran our shuttle business. We had a 28-seater coach, and the front tires on the coach are different to the rear tires. So they're more longitudinal, and the tread pattern it is. And a passenger got onto the vehicle and saw these tires and thought they were worn through, and they were actually new tires. So the travel booker then phoned me and said, "How is this possible? You put my people in danger, my staff in danger, etc., etc." So then we go and take a photo of the tires. We go and look at the manufacturer, whoever it was, and get their specifications, provide all that information, and pass it on, to your travel buyer. And now they're more informed, and that's what's important about having a relationship with your providers. So, and the tires were fine. Obviously, but they wouldn't have known, and if you're not in the space, you don't always know. So it's not that it was a criticism, it was just we had to inform our clients.
Yeah.
So there are a number of things to watch out for and to look for. Yeah.
Sure. We've heard some hairy stories of e-hailing and getting in and sitting in the front seat and somebody, anyway, I'm not going to go there.
Yes.
So talking about the app, and I'm very aware that I think our passengers and our travelers may actually have app fatigue at this stage of the game. We've been so active on our phones and with everything there, and I think there's a fight for space as far as travel is concerned. So in your experience, do the travelers want a specific app that tracks their driver and understands that we're not relying on what his word says as to I should be there but at 10 past and actually going to arrive, pull in at 12 past? Or do we have, can we use the generic app provided for by the TMC or the booking tool or airline? How do we do, what is best practice? What is the best?
So, yeah, I mean, and obviously it's a personal, personal feeling on that, but to be honest with you, I think, just in traveling in South Africa, you might be using 3 different operators in Durban, Johannesburg, and Cape Town. And would you want to have each app on your phone and having to manage the process? But let me take a step back. It's important, Robin, without question. And that has actually been the advent of e-hailing. They've made people realize that they can track and follow their driver and see how far they are. And while they're not always 100% correct, we've seen that the driver's 2 minutes away and all of a sudden he's 7 minutes away. It really gives us a sense of comfort that we know somebody's on the way, as opposed to just an SMS coming through. So yes, I do think it's a critical part to the traveller's journey, and we've spoken about duty of care. I think it is part of that process as well. But I think it needs to be incorporated into a broader travel app, one that traveler downloads for the entire travel experience. And I don't think the creators of travel apps as a whole are putting much emphasis on the ground transport element of it. You know, the engagements I have with them, if they are thinking about it, they don't understand the full spectrum of what we can offer, and they don't allow for the full data of information to be passed on to them as well. So they haven't allowed for all the content that we can give them, the richness of the content that we can give them. So yeah, it's a difficult one to answer in the sense that there's not really great solutions out there, but there are solutions. And if we could get a single solution for your traveler, you know, to handle all the the whole travel itinerary on, including the ground transport, that would be ideal. But it is a requirement, without question.
So I'm sensing here that the ground transport industry or the ground transport providers haven't necessarily had the kind of relationships with travel buyers and TMCs that maybe we believe they should have. Are you suggesting that this is another relationship in the supply chain that we should be investing more time, understanding, and effort into?
I think there are other relationships. That's how, you know, maybe they're not spending enough time with them. And I do think that's on the part of a lot of the operators as well. They've also got to make the effort. They've got to set up the time to debrief the travel buyer on how things are going, give reports. But if they're not running systems, they can't give reports. They can't give feedback on travelers that might be wasting their money because they are always late and they're charging a standing fee for it. So it is a double-sided element that, you know, both the operator and travel buyer. But I think it's just a matter of travel buyers being more aware of the implications of ground transport on their travelers and on the travel environment and the risk that's involved in ground transport. So it's not just so much about another relationship, it's about understanding the whole part of the travel journey, and ground transport is very much part of the travel journey. And they should be very aware of that. So, and it should be, you use the word, you know, you mentioned nurturing. Yeah, it should be nurtured as part of the entire travel journey, without a question.
Yeah, Dorian, you've taught me something. I didn't take the same kind of interest, or didn't sense the same sort of interest in it. And I think car rental, we do. You know, everybody's got a relationship with car rental. So interesting. I'm just reading in some of the work that you're doing. I see you sit on a committee in Europe. Tell us about that. What is that all about?
So it's just a couple of ground transport providers. It's really new, been going about the last 3 months or so. We're setting it up amongst a number of business owners. Most of them are aggregators or big conference organizers, or data capturers along those lines, but all to do with ground. They have some relationship to ground transport, and we couldn't find any decent ground transport advice or advisory or committee or go-to, you know, association. So there's about 8 of us who got together and started chatting about it and thought, oh, let's form this committee. Let's see how we can promote ground transport, how we can educate the industry. And it's very different between Europe and America, and obviously South Africa and Africa. And it was very important for us to get members from the various regions so that we could get the different perspectives, which are really different. So it's still new, it's being developed. We want to have some podcasts similar to what we're doing today to give a bit of education on ground transport, what to look out for, why it's important to do, you know, to do certain things and to have a relationship, as I've alluded to quite a lot. And how can you also develop operators as well, not just the big players, but the guys that are in the smaller towns and villages, and obviously in Southern Africa, the SMEs that we want to promote. So that's the objective of the committee. And
what is it called? What are you calling it?
It's called the TAMS Ground Transport Committee at this stage.
Okay.
So which is for Tourism and Meeting Society, and that's where we are at the moment. So we're still undecided, but that's where it is at the moment.
Very good. And just, you know, in this world of acronyms, you mentioned one earlier, MAS. What does that mean?
So MAS stands for Mobility as a Service, and Again, another one is SaaS, which is system as a service, where just to go backwards a little bit, system as a service is where you get a technology that's been developed similar to what Toussaint is, and it's made available to a user, and a user generally pays a subscription fee or some sort of transaction fee to make use of that service in their platform in their environment. And it's singular, so like ours is for ground transport. But Mars is mobility as a service, and mobility as a service is garnering a lot of attention, particularly again in Europe and the Americas, where it encompasses all the ground transport elements into a single platform. So buses, taxis, pre-booked e-hailing, trains, metros, and the likes, and puts them onto one platform. And what happens is the consumer goes onto that platform and says, this is my starting point, this is my end point, and the system says, right, these are the different options, these are the different timeframes, and also links the different types of different modes of transport to create your entire journey. So I think it's a great solution, but you can imagine the amount of work that goes into trying to get timetables of every train, bus, and the likes solution throughout Europe and America for the start. But yeah, that's what it is. It's consolidating all the transport types into one platform.
It's fascinating. I mean, just from a global perspective, do you also form part of multinational deals and global deals? Do they call for ground transport providers?
Yeah. So again, no one operator or no one company services the entire globe. There's a lot of collaboration in the industry where a provider or an aggregator like ourselves becomes dominant in one area, and we're not dominant in another area. So what we want the content from, so for example, we're speaking to some guys in Japan, we want some content to be able to sell our inventory in Japan, but in turn I'd like to be able to sell their inventory in South Africa. And there's a lot of that going on. There's a lot of collaboration between suppliers, and you see that even with hotels. Booking.com gets its, and Agoda and the likes. They share a lot of content. Even in tours, there's a hell of a lot of content sharing. So it's very much the same. It might just be ground transport, but the principles are exactly the same. It's an aggregator, and we share content with other providers to make it easy for our clients to be able to book globally.
So, I mean, I've still got lots of questions, but one of them is again, we'll get to your product where you can answer this, but I'm interested to know, how do you guarantee with all the collaboration? So you've got a Chinese operator needing to use your services in South Africa. How are you sure that whoever you're recommending is going to deliver? Do you have the necessary checks and balances for tourism perspective?
Yeah, there are. Okay. Yeah, they certainly are. And that's the thing. We've had it where some of the aggregators don't even ask for any documentation on behalf of our operators. Some of these aggregators, should I say. And that surprises me. They just have to go forward, and maybe they've got the liability in place to cover any incident that happens, and they will deal with it internally. So it depends, I think, on the business model as well. But there's an understanding of what's in place. What's the legislation required by that country? Do we, as an aggregator, take responsibility for passing on their content to our partners, and can we assure our partners that we've checked all the documentation and that the duty of care is in place? So it's more a contractual agreement more than anything else, but it is a contractual agreement, and and the chances of something happening are real. That's one of the biggest challenges. So we've got to be on board with that. So it's one thing. So it's a legal contract, but the other thing is also trust. Do we trust the people that we're working with? Do they have a relationship with anybody else that we can get some references from, and just to work very closely with them? Have they had examples where there's been incidents, and how have they been resolved? And to do your research correctly on the providers that you're working with. Has there been any negative press on them? Has there been any negative outcomes because they weren't adequately covered and didn't have their checks and balances in place?
Dorian, one of the biggest things in the industry is obviously being able to uplift those smaller operators who come into the market, and how many of them, as you said earlier, are working off spreadsheets, or many of the operators, I don't know if they're small ones, but they're not necessarily digitally enabled to accept. And so how are you doing? How are we in terms of upliftment? Is your system, are we leaving these guys behind, or are we including them?
It's again double-sided. Yes, we are leaving them behind, but there's also got to be a willingness on their part. And I must be honest, it's been very challenging for the most part to get the guys to buy into the need for technology. And you'd think with all the advancement as a result of COVID and all these online meetings, and there's been so much hype and talk about technology, that you'd think the guys would want to say, yes, we're on board, we need technology. And there are, I'm not saying there aren't any, but it's an educational process, and we need to get them onto a platform so that they can get the exposure that they deserve. And we know we've got enterprise and supply development programs in South Africa, and our platform, and that's one of our main drivers, is to enhance these operators in South Africa at the moment, to be able to gain and garner business that they wouldn't be able to get in the independent right, and to make it easy for travel bookers to access as well. So it's one how do we help, but they've got to be easily accessible, and that's exactly what we're doing. They may not even have, they still may only have a Gmail account, and they may not have a website, but just by putting their content onto our platform, managing all the legislated requirements, and presenting them as a suitable solution to our travel bookers, they're easily booked. They're booked in under 90 seconds. And then we manage the back end between ourselves and between them, to making sure that the services obviously are delivered as well. And it's very easy for us to switch on and switch off operators, and it's very easy for us to take operators and say, you only want to deal with those 5, that's fine, you'll only get content from those 5. And we can introduce them to corporates, even to such a degree that we've got a corporate can provide us with their tender, and we can put it out to all our operators, so that it's enough for a corporate. That's great. They don't have to go and phone all these operators, do all the reference checking. They can send us what they require. We send it out to our database, and those operators will then provide a response, and the corporate can do with it as they please from there. And again, a lot of the smaller operators would not have been able to receive that kind of information had there not been part of a greater, a greater purpose. And that purpose is to grow and develop these operators, make them more professional, not just provide them with tools, but to educate them as well. And I do believe from a corporate perspective, enterprise and supply development is very complementary in terms of our platform. Okay. So we really, from that perspective, we'd really like to work closely with corporates.
Because I'm sure that there are many corporates who already have a partner, a small operator, whom they are doing their best to uplift, or part of their ESD product program. If they introduce them to you, you would then assist in loading them onto the platform, is what I'm hearing.
Yeah, so it's as simple as that. We'll interview them, make sure that they've got all the legislative requirements. A lot of corporates don't even realize what is required of them. So we'll just check that. We'll assist them with that process, point them in the right direction as well. And then, we do the onboarding, guide them through that. As I mentioned earlier on, a lot of the operators are unfamiliar with actually understanding their business. And we ask them, how did you get to those rates? And a lot of them just do a copy and paste. They go and see what's on the internet, and they, copy and paste and say, well, that's my rates. Yeah. So there's an educational process as well. We do training. We've got 2 days of 5-hour sessions that we train the guys onto the platform. And then the platform is also a management platform. So it's not just putting them on and that they get exposure, but they'll be able to grow and manage their businesses through our platform. We've got a management side to it as well, where the bookings appear on their dashboard. They don't have to recapture it into a diary or to an Excel spreadsheet. They allocate their driver to it. There's communication backwards and forwards, and it's easily managed on their end as well. And I think, Robin, that's also important for a corporate, is to understand that's great. I'm going to be able to easily give work to my operator, but now how's he managing that work? Yeah. And that's the other side of our platform, is that we're helping them to manage that business as well.
Okay, great. So this is the question: what is your business? Well, tell us. This is the chance that we give you to tell us who you are and or what your business is all about. This new platform.
Okay, so it's interesting. I'll just brief little story. We started a number of years back developing it. Initially, it was as a reservation system for our company, Professional Passenger Services. At the time, we wanted to enhance on the one we had in place. And then we realized we couldn't really find one. And I think it's important for everybody to understand there isn't really many products, or there aren't many products available in South Africa. They're all international products. There's no representation in South Africa, and all quoted in dollars. So they are rather expensive for South Africans. So we realized this and said, well, hold on, if we can't find it, let's take it to market, develop the operator side. And as we went to market, we were asked for the aggregator side. So the aggregator side from a travel booker's point of view is, can we have a single platform and have access to all the providers that we need? And then we pivoted the system to become more an aggregator than just an operator's tool. And that's what we are. We are an aggregator of ground transport content. We go and find ground transport operators. We meet with them. We check all the documentation, the history, and then we educate them and uplift them as well, and give them access to markets they wouldn't be able to do in their own right. There's obviously huge mountain of things that we still want to do, and we are a startup, so the list is very, very long. But the big thing is, how do we make this industry more professional? That's actually what we want to do, is to make these guys, to train them on hospitality. You know, I mentioned again earlier on, with the first and last part of the trip, how do we make it a memorable part of the trip? You mentioned Dubai, and that's exactly what we've got to train the guys. They don't understand it yet. A lot of them got into it by default because they don't have a job and somebody's got a car lying around. So how do we make that experience far more superior and enhanced to what it is now? So there's a huge opportunity to teach and to grow the operators. And then some that don't want. So that's what we also need to do, is we need to iron that out and say, well, the guys who don't want to be left behind will be left behind. It's as simple as that. Yeah, we integrate with a number of booking platforms. We're on the GDSs, and we integrate into other online booking tools and the likes. And or we have, you know, through our browser, you can log in with the username and password and use the tool in that environment as well. So if a corporate, for example, has got an in-house, or they've got their own PA who wants to make bookings and they don't have an actual booking tool, yeah, we can just give them access to our tool, and they can have access to their specific operators. They don't have to use all our operators. We just put their operators on, and they get their rates that they agreed. So the rates are also unique to each operator. We just guide them along the way and help them with that process and help.
Wow.
Businesses.
It sounds very exciting. Are you there? Am I still here? So are you there?
Yeah.
I think we had a bit of a lull in signal.
It's dawn. Can you hear me now?
Yeah, better. There you go. I can hear you.
Robert, can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Hello.
Yeah, I can hear you. Nikki, is it me or is it?
Can you hear me now?
I can hear you.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it is. It's very interesting. You know. All right.
Yeah.
But yeah, we're very, very excited, Robin. It's to be able to create and develop this industry and make it more professional. Yeah, there's a lot of beauty, and we get to work with the industry. That's what our objective is.
Well done. And just a question. I mean, who would you? What are you affiliated, or do you belong to any of the associations, or are you the, you know, the regulator of a non-regulated industry as such? Dorian, do you want to?
So, okay, so yeah, we're obviously very much part of GBTA. That's using. Can you hear me?
I think it's you. Do you want to, Dorian, may I suggest you turn your video off?
Let's do that. There we go. Is that better?
Yes, better.
Oh, fantastic. So yeah, you know, part of GBTA, which is great, and that's very valuable for us to be able to pass. A lot of what we've spoken about today is valuable to your travel buyers, and that's all we want to do, is just educate our travel buyers on what's happening in the industry, and so that's a good one for us. And then SATSA as well. We subscribe to SATSA, but we are still a young company, so hopefully next year that will be switched on, or we'll become a member of them as well. And then there's no body in South Africa for ground transport. So it might be something that we look into, to setting up and having some sort of standard.
Fantastic. Dorian, it's been very enlightening, I have to say, and I'm very grateful for you coming on and sharing. So I really do appreciate it. And if anybody has any questions, please shoot them now. but we've been busy for an hour. It's flown past, so I really do appreciate that. And sure, I can only say good luck. It sounds like a fantastic idea, a fantastic platform, and certainly sounds like it's the future. So we'll obviously stay in contact, and you'll keep us posted. But good luck. Really
Thank you
sounds
very much.